I want you to close your eyes if you can and just put yourself in a very specific, a very terrifying scenario.
Right.
It is January of 1924. You are standing on the weather-beaten deck of a commercial steamer, cutting through the North Atlantic. It's the dead of night, or, maybe those early hours of the morning before the sun even considers rising.
No, that's the absolute worst time to be out there.
Exactly, and the ocean is choked with this thick, freezing fog, the kind of fog that just clings to your clothes, and it makes it impossible to see more than a dozen feet in any direction.
Yeah, you're practically blind.
You are. The only sound is the rhythmic mechanical thrumming of your own ship's engine and the heavy, terrifyingly loud slap of black water against the steel hull.
It is the absolute definition of sensory deprivation. I mean, the isolation is total. Remember, in 1924, you don't have satellite navigation pointing your way. You don't have modern radar systems to pierce through that atmospheric soup. You are entirely reliant on the strained, freezing eyes of the watchmen up in the crow's nest. And they're just staring into a void that is, frankly, actively trying to blind them.
You are visually blind out in the middle of a watery abyss. And this is the part that gets me, as your eyes desperately try to adjust to the gloom the fog parts, just for a fraction of a second.
Just long enough.
Right. And right there, drifting silently across your path, completely unlit, is a massive, ghostly white hull.
Unbelievable.
There are no masts. There is no crew. There is no sound of engines or voices. It looks like a leviathan, a dead thing that has just breached the surface of the water, riding the ocean swells like a corpse that absolutely refuses to sink.
Seeing something like that would chill the blood of the most hardened veteran sailor on the water. Because a ship in that condition, dismasted, unlit, sitting that incredibly low in the water well, it should be at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, it defies logic.
It does. Its very presence on the surface breaks the fundamental laws of maritime reality.
So today, we are going on a mission to track down that exact phantom. We're doing a deep dive into the story of the Governor Parr. And this isn't just another tragic narrative about a shipwreck.
No, not at all.
This is a true, documented story about the most stubborn, terrifying shipwreck in recorded history. We're looking at a 900-ton, four-masted schooner that experienced a violent, catastrophic death in the middle of a hurricane and then somehow, impossibly, survived its own death.
Which sounds like fiction, but we've pulled together an incredible stack of sources for this.
We really have.
I mean, we've got original 1920s logbooks, declassified naval reports, historical meteorological data, and surviving news clippings. We're piecing together how this crewless phantom wandered the oceans for over 2 years.
2 entire years.
Yeah, it defied devastating storms, it defied the crushing weight of the Atlantic, and, as we'll get into, it even defied a literal military execution.
It forces us to confront the sheer terrifying power of the ocean, but also the uncanny, almost unnatural resilience of human engineering. It plays out like a ghost story, a piece of maritime folklore, but every single piece of this nightmare actually happened.
The data is all there. It's completely embedded in the historical record.
So to understand how a ship becomes a monster, this unkillable phantom drifting in the dark, we have to look at its anatomy. We have to rewind from that foggy apparition in 1924 back to the year 1918 in Parrsboro, Nova Scotia.
Right, because Nova Scotia at that time had a profound, deeply ingrained maritime history. I mean, they were master shipbuilders.
Yeah, some of the best in the world.
Absolutely. But by 1918, the world was rapidly changing. The Industrial Revolution had fully taken hold of the oceans. Steam power and heavy steel construction had largely pushed out the old ways.
The era of sail was dying.
It really was. The golden era of massive, wind-powered wooden sailing ships was drawing to a close. So the Governor Parr was, in many ways, a swan song for an entire industry.
She was the last of her kind, built in Parrsboro. And the sheer scale of this vessel, it's honestly hard to comprehend. When we say wooden ship, I think people might picture like a pirate galleon or a small fishing boat.
Yeah, they underestimate the size.
Totally. The Governor Parr was a 900-ton, four-masted giant.
The engineering required to build a wooden structure, that massive structure capable of withstanding the torsional stress of the open ocean, is staggering.
It's mind-blowing.
You're talking about incredibly dense old-growth timber, massive iron fastenings, and a keel designed to keep 900 tons of material upright while towering sails actively try to pull it over.
4 masts. That means 4 towering trunks of old-growth trees bolted deep into the hull, carrying enough heavy canvas to capture the wind and drag almost 1,000,000 pounds of wood and cargo across the planet.
And they painted her this brilliant, pristine, almost ghostly white.
Which just adds to the eerie factor later on.
It really does. She was built to be a beautiful, highly functional workhorse, which is exactly what she was for the first few years of her life. But the turning point, the moment her fate is truly sealed, comes in the autumn of 1923.
October, right.
Yeah. The Governor Parr departs from Port, Nova Scotia, with her destination set for Buenos Aires, Argentina. This is a massive, multi-week journey down the entire length of the Atlantic Ocean.
And her cargo for this specific voyage is the key to everything. This is what makes the whole story happen. She was carrying 1.5 million feet of high-grade lumber.
The physical reality of that cargo is the linchpin of this entire mystery, because the specific gravity of wood is generally less than the specific gravity of seawater.
It naturally wants to float.
Exactly. It has natural buoyancy. If you punch a massive hole in the side of a modern steel freighter, the ocean rushes into the empty space. The overall density of the ship becomes greater than the water displacing it, and, well, it plummets to the ocean floor.
Because steel is incredibly heavy.
Right. Steel is far denser than water.
But the Governor Parr wasn't just a wooden ship. She was a wooden ship packed to the absolute brim with more wood. I picture it like building a massive, heavy fortress entirely out of life preservers.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
Its sheer weight is driving the ship deep into the water, making it a profitable transport venture, but the material itself fundamentally refuses to sink.
Right. And in the eyes of the commercial shipping world, that lumber was just a product to be sold in Argentina. But when disaster struck, the ocean stripped away her identity as a commercial vessel.
It totally changed what she was.
Yes. That cargo went from being a profitable payload to an indestructible, horrifying life support system. The ocean transformed her from a ship into a massive, unsinkable artificial island.
Okay, so she leaves Port. It's October 1923. And anyone who has studied the North Atlantic knows that autumn is it's a terrifying time to be out there.
The worst. The weather systems are in violent transition.
Yeah, you have cold, dense air masses from the Arctic dropping down and violently clashing with the warmer, moist air still moving up the Gulf Stream. It creates these sudden, absolute monster storms.
The meteorological mechanics of an October North Atlantic storm are brutal. You get incredibly steep pressure gradients, which results in violent hurricane-force gales. And that is exactly what the Governor Parr sailed into on October 3rd.
The sources describe it basically as a descent into hell. Up until this point, we've got this pristine white masterpiece gliding across the ocean, and then the abyss opens.
The Atlantic turns violent in a way that, frankly, modern minds really struggle to grasp. We sit in structurally sound, climate-controlled rooms. We don't know what that feels like.
No, we really don't. The sky turns a bruised purplish black. The ocean stops being a flat surface and turns into a chaotic landscape of moving, collapsing mountains.
Try to imagine the auditory and physical terror of a storm like this if you're standing on a wooden deck. The waves aren't just splashing. You have hundreds of tons of water colliding with the hull over and over again.
The kinetic energy transfer must be insane.
It's massive. And the sound of the wind survivors of these storms always talk about the sound. It isn't howling. It's a high-pitched, shrieking vibration that you feel in your teeth and your bones.
Oh, man. And all of that wind pressure is catching the rigging. Even with the sails reefed, tightly rolled up to minimize their profile, the wind is exerting an unimaginable amount of force on those 4 massive masts.
The leverage that a 100-foot mast has on a ship's hull in a hurricane is catastrophic.
It's acting like a giant lever trying to rip the ship apart.
Exactly. And the sheer force of the hurricane found the breaking point of this masterpiece. The dismasting of the Governor Parr is a moment of pure kinetic violence.
I was reading the survivor accounts, and they describe the dismasting with this terrifying casualness. They say the mizzen and jigger masts, the massive, towering wooden poles at the rear of the ship, snapped quote-unquote like toothpicks.
Like toothpicks. The tensile strength of the wood simply failed against the sustained pressure.
Imagine the explosive sound of a wooden mast of that size splintering.
It would be deafening. You have tons of solid timber, heavy iron rigging, thick steel cables, and heavy canvas crashing down onto the deck. And remember, it's happening in pitch-black darkness, illuminated only by sudden flashes of lightning.
The ship is literally being torn apart from above. The deck instantly becomes a chaotic nightmare of jagged, swinging wood and whipping cables capable of cutting a man in half.
It's a miracle anyone survived the initial collapse.
Seriously. And it's in the middle of this structural failure that the story shifts into a profound, devastating human tragedy. Because as the crew is scrambling over the wreckage, completely disoriented, trying to clear the debris before it punches holes in the deck, a rogue wave hits.
Yeah. And a rogue wave isn't just a large wave in a storm.
Right, it's something else entirely.
In meteorological and oceanographic terms, it's an anomaly. It's caused by constructive interference, where multiple wave trains traveling at different speeds converge and temporarily combine their energy into a single, massive wall of water.
They can be twice the size of the surrounding storm swells, right?
At least. And they rise up out of the dark with absolutely no warning.
This wall of water sweeps completely over the shattered deck of the Governor Parr, and in a fraction of a second, the ocean extracts its toll. Captain Angus Richards and one of the seamen they're gone.
Swallowed by the black water in an instant.
It is a moment of absolute horrifying finality. There's no time to scream over the roar of the storm. There's no time to reach for a lifeline or throw a life preserver.
No. 1 second, they're fighting to save their ship, and the next second, the deck is empty where they stood. They're swept into the freezing, churning abyss, just vanishing into the dark.
Let's talk about the psychological shock of that moment, because you're reading these sources and the narrative has to keep moving. But for the remaining 6 men on that deck, time must have just stopped.
It would have to. The trauma is incomprehensible.
You are already in the middle of the most terrifying physical ordeal of your life. The ship you trust is literally being ripped apart beneath your feet. And then, in the blink of an eye, your leader, your captain, the man whose vast experience you are entirely relying on to navigate this crisis, is wiped from existence.
The mental state of the survivors is critical here. It's a double decapitation of the vessel. The ship loses its physical masts, and the crew loses its command structure.
That's a haunting way to put it.
The psychological blow of losing a captain and a friend in an instant, while still surrounded by the storm that killed them, leaves the remaining crew entirely rudderless. They are alone in the dark, standing on a dying ship.
Which plunges them directly into what the records essentially describe as a waking purgatory. Because the initial disaster, the snapping of the masts, the rogue wave that is a moment of acute, violent trauma, but what follows is a prolonged, excruciating psychological and physical horror. They were trapped in this state for 36 hours.
36 hours of continuous torment. With the masts gone, the immense torque of the dismasting likely compromised the integrity of the hull, and the storm waves severely breached the deck.
So it's filling with water.
Fast. The ship begins to flood. It starts to settle deep into the ocean. The buoyant lumber, tightly packed in the hold, is the only thing keeping them from plunging straight to the bottom. But the deck itself is slipping beneath the freezing waves.
So these 6 men, freezing, soaked to the bone in icy Atlantic water, realize the deck is no longer safe. They have to lash themselves to the jagged, splintered stumps of the ruined masts.
They literally use ropes to tie their bodies to the wreckage,
just to avoid being washed away by the continuous heavy waves crashing over the sunken deck.
The human body is not designed to survive those conditions. When submerged in cold water, heat loss occurs 25 times faster than in cold air.
25 times, wow.
Your core body temperature begins to plummet. Your extremities go numb as the body violently shunts blood to your vital organs to keep you alive. And you are tied to a piece of broken wood, unable to move to generate heat.
Every time a wave hits, you are submerged in freezing black water. You're choking, you're gasping for air, the salt water stinging your eyes, and with every single wave, you are wondering if this is the one that finally overcomes the buoyancy of the lumber and pulls the rest of the ship down into the dark.
You're waiting to die.
Mentally, for a day and a half, you are just staring at the ocean, slowly swallowing your home.
It is an environment designed to extinguish hope. But then, as the storm begins to marginally subside, a shape appears on the horizon.
A passing American freighter, the SS Schodack, comes steaming through the violent, heaving swells.
If you are one of those men tied to the mast, seeing that silhouette, seeing the smoke from the steamer's funnel, it is pure salvation. You would scream until your vocal cords tore.
You would wave your frozen, numb arms.
But the Schodack continues on its course.
Wow.
Because you have to realize, in the vast expanse of the ocean, amidst the massive rolling swells of a dying gale, a half-sunken, dismasted wooden hull is practically invisible.
It's camouflaged.
Completely. It has no profile against the horizon. The freighter simply fails to see them in the chaotic water.
To survive the violent death of your ship, To endure 36 hours of freezing, agonizing torment, to finally see rescue and then have to watch it slowly sail away, that is a level of gut-wrenching despair that would break almost any human mind.
It would push anyone to the absolute brink of surrender. But this is the moment where the historical accounts reveal the raw, feral, unbreakable human will to live.
Yeah, this part is wild.
The survivors realize they are invisible against the dark, churning water. They need a visual signal that pierces the gloom. They need fire.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on this because when I first read this detail in the source material, I honestly didn't believe it.
It's hard to fathom.
Let's be incredibly clear about the physics of their environment. You are in the aftermath of a hurricane. You are lashed to a half-sunken stump. You have been continuously pounded by freezing ocean waves for 36 hours.
Everything is dripping wet.
Every single surface is soaked. You are soaked. The air is filled with salt spray. How on earth, with violently trembling, hypothermic hands, do you even find the presence of mind, let alone the dry materials, to start a fire?
It sounds completely impossible, but it speaks to the insane ingenuity of desperate people. The historical sources confirm this visceral, frantic act. The survivors managed to ignite their own sweaters to act as a flare.
Their own sweaters, the very clothing that was providing their last microscopic layer of insulation?
They sacrificed their only barrier against hypothermia to create a temporary light.
That requires a profound, terrifying calculation of risk.
To know that if this fire fails to catch the freighter's attention, you've just accelerated your own death by freezing. Mechanically speaking, we have to assume that one of the sailors possessed a high-quality, waterproof match safe deeply buried beneath layers of oilskins.
It's the only way.
Yeah. They would have had to huddle their bodies together, using themselves as a human windbreak to shield a tiny, fragile spark from the gale-force winds, nursing it into a flame using the driest inner layers of their damp wool clothing.
It is a profound, defiant act of survival against the dark, and miraculously, it works. The bright orange flames against the drab, gray backdrop of the storm catch the attention of the watchmen on the SS Schodack.
The freighter changes course. The rescue operation itself would have been grueling, requiring the American crew to pull 6 half-dead, unresponsive men from the chaotic, heaving wreckage of a sunken deck in the middle of massive swells.
But they manage it. The survivors are hauled up the steep steel side of the Schodack, collapsing onto the deck, finally safe.
And there is this highly cinematic, deeply haunting image recorded in the logs that concludes this specific chapter of the story. As the Schodack powers up its steam engines and begins to sail away from the disaster zone, the rescued men and the American crew stand at the railing.
They look back at the waterlogged, shattered, ruined hull of the Governor Parr. It's barely visible in the churning water, slowly drifting backward into the suffocating ocean fog.
They look at it with the solemnity of men looking at an open grave. They assume, based on every rule of maritime physics they know, that the ship is in its final death throes.
That within a matter of hours, the ocean will finish the job, the water will overcome the buoyant lumber, and the remains will be dragged to the bottom of the Atlantic.
They thought they were witnessing a burial. But the terrifying truth is that it wasn't a grave at all. It was a cocoon.
Oh, man, that gives me chills.
The ocean wasn't destroying the Governor Parr. It was fundamentally altering its nature. The human element, the vulnerable flesh and blood, was gone.
The captain was dead. The crew was evacuated.
The ship was no longer a vessel meant to be commanded or steered. It was returning to a primal state. It was now 900 tons of heavy wood, packed tightly with 1.5 million feet of lumber, deeply saturating with dense ocean water. It was dead, but it was about to awaken as something entirely different.
This is the exact moment we transition from a harrowing, relatively straightforward story of human survival into the birth of a genuine, documented maritime legend. We are going to follow this presumed corpse into the fog.
Months pass in total silence.
Yeah.
October turns to November, then December.
The North Atlantic winter fully sets in,
bringing violent storms, plunging temperatures, and endless freezing gray skies. The Governor Parr is officially written off the registries. It becomes a memory.
Until January 1924. 3 full months after she was abandoned and left for dead in a hurricane.
3 months.
A passing steamer is cutting through a heavy fog bank, the exact scenario we discussed at the top of this deep dive. And a chilling report is sent out over the wireless telegraph, a ghostly white, mastless hull riding incredibly low in the water, drifting completely silently through the mist.
It's the Governor Parr. She's alive. Or, rather, she is undead.
The moment that report hits the authorities, it triggers a massive response. If you're listening to this and wondering why they didn't just let it float around, you have to understand the extreme hazard this presented.
It was incredibly dangerous.
You cannot have a massive, unsteered 900-ton hull wandering blindly through international shipping lanes. It is a lethal threat to every passenger liner and freighter on the water. So the United States Coast Guard dispatches a cutter, the Tampa, to locate the ghost ship and neutralize the threat.
And the Tampa manages to hunt her down. They locate this massive, waterlogged derelict, slowly drifting in the freezing swells.
And the plan is simple, right?
Now, the operational plan is incredibly straightforward by Coast Guard standards. Attach a heavy steel tow line, fire up the engines, and drag the ruined hull back to port in Halifax to be dismantled.
But the Governor Parr seemed to have absolutely no intention of going back to Halifax. The ensuing struggle between the Coast Guard cutter and the ghost ship is a masterclass in terrifying physics. I want you to break this down for us. Why is towing a derelict wooden ship so difficult for a powerful motorized cutter?
It comes down to displacement and drag. When a ship is functioning normally, it sits on the water. Its watertight hull displaces water, making it highly buoyant, and its shape is designed to slice relatively easily through the sea.
Like a knife.
Right. But the Governor Parr was almost completely submerged. Her lower holds were completely flooded. That 1.5 million feet of lumber wasn't just damp. It was thoroughly, deeply waterlogged. She wasn't sitting on the water anymore. She was deeply embedded in it.
She's essentially become a part of the ocean itself. She has the density of a submerged iceberg.
Precisely. You are no longer trying to tow a boat. You are trying to drag an artificial reef.
Wow.
You are dealing with the immense dead weight of 900 tons of saturated wood, plus the thousands of tons of heavy seawater trapped inside her flooded hull, all creating massive hydrodynamic drag against the tow line.
The timing couldn't be worse. Right as the Tampa secures the heavy towing cable and begins to strain its engines to pull this massive weight, a new winter storm rolls in.
The worst possible luck.
The ocean starts to heave. The physics of this are terrifying. The Coast Guard ship is rising violently on a massive swell, pulling forward, while the Governor Parr is dropping like a stone into a deep wave trough, pulling backward. The kinetic tension on that line must have been astronomical.
The physical stress is immense. You have the mechanical pulling power of the Tampa's engines fighting against the absolute sheer inertia of this massive dead Leviathan. And all of it is exacerbated by the violent kinetic energy of the storm waves, violently yanking the ships in opposite directions.
The naval sources describe what happened next with a brilliant, chilling simile. The heavy tow line, a massive, incredibly thick braided cable specifically designed to pull thousands of tons of dead weight snaps, quote unquote, like sewing thread.
The sudden, violent release of kinetic tension when a cable like that snaps is explosive. It would have whipped back toward the Coast Guard cutter with enough force to cut through steel.
What strikes me when reading the historical accounts of this specific encounter is the tone of the sailors. Sailors are, by nature, very practical, pragmatic people.
They have to be.
They understand fluid dynamics, they understand weather, they understand the limits of their equipment. But the framing of this event by the men on the Tampa is eerie. It's almost supernatural. They spoke about it in their reports as though the Governor Parr was actively, consciously fighting back.
It felt deliberate to them. The sheer stubbornness of the wreckage defied their practical understanding of how a derelict should behave.
It resented the intrusion. Like, it absolutely refused to be rescued, captured, or contained. The tow line violently snaps, the winter storm intensifies, visibility drops to zero, and the Coast Guard crew is forced to stand on their deck and watch helplessly as the white ghost of Nova Scotia slips backward into the freezing mist, disappearing once again into the dark.
Having physically escaped the United States Coast Guard, the ship's status fundamentally elevates. She is no longer just a floating derelict to be towed away.
Sea level's up.
She becomes an unmoored apex predator of the shipping lanes, a massive, silent sentinel riding the global currents.
Let's track this incredible silent journey. Because the Governor Parr doesn't just bob around in one localized spot off the coast of Canada. She goes on a massive, unguided tour of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, she gets around.
After vanishing from the Coast Guard in January, the sightings go dark for months. Then she reappears in July of 1924.
And look at where she is spotted in July. The reports place her 800 miles northeast of the Virgin Islands. She has traveled thousands of miles south.
It's crazy.
And then, later reports track her thousands of miles east, appearing near the Canary Islands off the western coast of Africa.
How is this possible? How is a completely waterlogged ship with absolutely no sails, no engines, and no human crew crossing the entirety of the Atlantic Ocean?
She is surrendered completely to one of the most powerful natural forces on the planet, the Great Atlantic Gyre.
Break down the mechanics of this gyre for us, because to the average person, the ocean is just a massive static bathtub of water that occasionally gets windy.
The ocean is a highly dynamic, constantly moving planetary engine. A gyre is a massive circulating system of ocean currents. It's driven by global wind patterns, solar heating, and crucially the Coriolis effect.
Rotation of the Earth.
Right, the rotation of the Earth itself deflecting the path of massive bodies of water. In the North Atlantic, this complex system acts like a slow, gigantic, clockwise conveyor belt.
So she gets caught in the powerful Gulf Stream off the eastern coast of North America, which pushes her north and east across the Atlantic. Then she gets caught in the Canary Current, which flows south down the coast of Africa. And finally, the North Equatorial Current grabs her and pushes her back west toward the Caribbean.
That is exactly the route. The Governor Parr, sitting deep in the water, essentially became a deep draft drifter. She was perfectly positioned to be swept up into this planetary mechanism.
Just a passenger?
She became a silent, unblinking passenger on a massive aquatic highway, drifting relentlessly at a speed of maybe 10 to 20 miles a day. Completely silent and entirely unpredictable to the modern ships trying to navigate those waters.
And this brings us to the true visceral terror she posed. She wasn't just a fascinating maritime curiosity. She was a highly lethal threat. Now, let's emphasize what this object actually was at this point in 1924.
People need to picture this.
She was a 200-foot-long, 900-ton block of dark, waterlogged wood. Because she was flooded, she sat incredibly low in the water. Her deck was virtually flush with the ocean surface, meaning she wouldn't even show up as a silhouette against the horizon.
And most crucially, she was completely unlit. In 1924, long before commercial radar, visual spotting was the only method of avoiding collisions at night. Ships carried bright running lights so they could be seen from miles away.
But the Governor Parr had nothing.
The Governor Parr was a massive black void drifting in a pitch-black ocean.
Put yourself in the mind of a captain of a passenger liner crossing the Atlantic in 1924. You are steaming at 20 knots through the darkness. Below decks, you have hundreds of passengers sleeping in their cabins. And drifting directly into your path is an immovable 900-ton wall of solid wood that you cannot see, you cannot hear, and you cannot detect until your steel bow violently crumples against it.
Hitting the Governor Parr at speed would be exactly like hitting a massive iceberg. It would tear the bottom out of any commercial ship on the ocean.
She was a floating acoustic mine, and the International Maritime Authorities understood this threat perfectly. By August of 1924, her existence was no longer a quirky news story. It was an international shipping crisis.
The decision was made at the highest levels of naval command. The Governor Parr was simply too dangerous to be allowed to exist. She had to be destroyed.
It's incredible to think about. They issue a literal military death warrant for a pile of floating wood. They dispatch heavily armed naval warships to hunt the Phantom. And it is the British Navy that finally tracks her down as she drifts near the African coast.
They finally corner her. But now the British Navy faces a highly bizarre tactical problem. How do you kill a ship that is already dead?
Right.
How do you forcefully sink a vessel that is essentially a solid, buoyant block of wood?
Wait, the British Navy is the most powerful maritime force on Earth at this time. Why didn't they just point their massive deck guns at it and blow it to pieces? Or ram it?
Well, ramming a 900-ton block of dense wood is a great way to severely damage your own warship.
Good point.
And as for artillery, the physics don't work. You shoot high-explosive naval rounds at her, you have two outcomes. The shells either pass straight through her rotting upper timbers without detonating, or they explode and just shatter the hull into thousands of smaller, equally dangerous floating hazards.
You don't sink the threat, you just multiply it.
Multiply it.
And you can't shoot holes in it to make it sink because it already has holes in it. It's entirely waterlogged and it still stubbornly floats.
Exactly. So unable to sink her conventionally, the Navy resorts to the oldest, most primal method of maritime destruction they have at their disposal.
Fire.
They make the calculated decision to burn the monster down to the waterline, destroying its structural integrity so the ocean can finally swallow the ashes.
The naval records describe this execution, and the imagery is incredibly cinematic. The British warship pulls alongside the rotting white hull. They send over armed working parties in small boats.
These sailors board the ghost ship and begin systematically dousing the entire deck, down into the shattered holds with hundreds of gallons of heavy, thick black oil.
They deeply saturate whatever exposed wood they can find. The goal is to create an inferno so intensely hot that it will consume everything down to the ash, destroying the buoyancy of the 1.5 million feet of lumber.
They set the incendiary charges, retreat to the safety of their warship, and ignite it.
Picture the scene. The ocean is pitch black. The African coast is just a rumor somewhere in the distance, and suddenly the silent night sky is violently ruptured by a blinding, roaring pillar of fire. The flames shoot hundreds of feet into the air.
The intense crackle and hiss of the burning oil and ancient wood echoes across the water.
Sailors stand on the steel deck of the British warship, watching the Governor Parr turn into a floating sun, throwing dancing orange light across the midnight waves for miles in every direction.
They watch it burn for a significant amount of time. They watch until they are absolutely professionally certain that nothing could survive that kind of prolonged thermal event.
They figure it's over.
They assume the core structure has been irrevocably compromised. The buoyant lumber turned to cinder. The British Navy turns their warship around and sails away, thoroughly convinced that the menace has finally been executed. They telegraph back to command, target destroyed.
Target destroyed! You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief radiating through the international shipping lanes. The ghost is dead. The nightmare is over. But the ocean and the stubborn corpse of the Governor Parr had one more terrifying trick to play.
Weeks pass. The smoke has long cleared. The naval reports of the successful execution have been filed in London, and then the wireless telegraphs start frantically chattering again.
Another sighting.
Another sighting in the shipping lanes.
A completely blackened, thoroughly charred hull is seen slowly, silently drifting toward the West Indies.
She had survived a deliberate, calculated, overwhelming military execution.
I am looking at the reports of this, and I have to ask how. How is that physically possible? The British Navy doused her in heavy oil. They sat there and watched her burn into an inferno. How does a wooden ship survive that?
We have to break down the incredible irony of her survival, because it perfectly illustrates the physics of the ocean. It all comes back to her birth and her specific cargo. We talked about how the freezing water that swallowed her deck during the hurricane turned her into an artificial island.
Yeah.
Well, that very same water had deeply, thoroughly soaked the 1.5 million feet of tightly packed lumber in her hold over the course of the previous 10 months adrift.
The wood inside her belly wasn't just damp, it was profoundly saturated. It had absorbed the ocean.
Precisely. You have to consider the specific heat capacity of water, which is incredibly high. When the Navy ignited the oil on the upper decks, it burned fiercely, rapidly destroying the superficial, drier wood above the waterline.
But it couldn't go deep.
The fire couldn't penetrate deep into the hull. The sheer volume of freezing Atlantic Ocean water trapped within the dense, tightly packed lumber acted as an impenetrable thermal shield. The water literally absorbed the heat and put out the flames from below before they could compromise the ship's core buoyancy.
It's darkly poetic. The very ocean that killed her crew and shattered her masts is the exact same force that violently protected her from destruction. The waterlogged heart of the ship simply refused to burn.
So she just shed her pristine white skin in the fire, took on a terrifying, charred, blackened armor, and silently continued her slow, menacing drift across the world.
Which brings us to the final act of this unbelievable, documented saga. We move from the ship's ultimate act of defiance, surviving a naval inferno, to her final, deeply mysterious exit from the historical record.
Because after outliving her captain, surviving a category-level hurricane, breaking a heavy Coast Guard tow line, surfing the massive Atlantic gyre across the globe, and literally shrugging off a British Navy firebombing, she just vanishes.
The final, officially recorded sighting of the Governor Parr by a passing vessel occurred in October of 1925.
Let's just pause and highlight the staggering, horrific statistics of this afterlife. She was violently dismasted and abandoned in October 1923. The last sighting is October 1925.
She had been drifting, completely alone, as an unsteered, unpowered derelict for over 700 days.
2 full years of wandering the abyss. And in that time, riding those massive, slow ocean currents, maritime historians estimate she covered an astonishing 5,000 miles.
5,000 miles.
5,000 miles without a single living soul aboard. 5,000 miles of silent, dark, lethal navigation.
And then, after that October 1925 sighting near the West Indies, nothing. The historical record just goes completely blank. The wireless reports stop. The phantom is gone.
It creates this unresolved mystery that is deeply unsettling. What was her ultimate fate? Did the relentless daily pounding of the ocean's swells finally loosen her massive iron fastenings, causing the charred hull to just quietly break apart into a million harmless floating splinters?
Or did the waterlogging finally, after 2 years, reach a critical mass? Wood will eventually succumb to rot and shipworms. It will eventually lose its buoyancy. Did she slowly, silently slip beneath the waves on some quiet Tuesday night, drifting down into the crushing black abyss without a single human eye there to witness her final death?
Or, perhaps even more hauntingly, did she finally make landfall? Did she ride a Caribbean current into some remote, uninhabited beach in South America? Did she violently grind to a halt on a hidden coral reef, sitting there for decades, a blackened, rotting monument to the 1920s, slowly being consumed and reclaimed by the jungle and the sand?
That eerie lack of closure is what makes the story stick in your mind long after you hear it. We have pinpoint tracking data, we have desperate survivor rescues, we have highly dramatic naval encounters spanning 2 entire years, and then just an empty, silent ocean. It is the ultimate frustrating, terrifying cliffhanger. The sea just swallowed the story whole and refused to give us an ending.
If we synthesize the overarching themes of this deep dive, the Governor Parr becomes so much more than just a historical footnote in a naval ledger. She's a towering testament to a bygone era of human endeavor.
The era of the wooden sail.
She was a ship built with such incredible, flawless, stubborn craftsmanship. Massive timbers perfectly joined, specifically designed to battle the planet's harshest, most violent environment, that even the violent death of her crew, hurricane-force winds, crushing wave physics, and the highly coordinated efforts of the British military couldn't keep her down.
She was literally built too well to die when she was supposed to.
Yes, but simultaneously, we can never lose sight of the profound human element inextricably intertwined with her legend. The Governor Parr isn't just a fascinating story about fluid dynamics, buoyant wood, and ocean currents.
No, it's the deeply tragic story of Captain Angus Richards, swallowed instantly by the dark before he could even process what was happening. It's the harrowing story of those 6 freezing men lashed to broken wood, watching their salvation sail away into the fog and finding the insane, feral courage to set their own clothes on fire just for a chance to live.
And it's the psychological terror of every watchman on every steamer crossing the Atlantic in 1924, staring out into the pitch-black night, absolutely terrified that a silent, blackened wall of wood was waiting in the gloom to tear the bottom of their ship apart.
The ocean is a massive theater of profound human vulnerability. The Governor Parr reminds us of how incredibly fragile our control over that environment truly is. We build our mighty steel ships, we chart our precise GPS courses, we look at radar, and we feel like we are the absolute masters of the sea. But the ocean always, inevitably, has the final say.
It always does.
So I want to leave you with a thought, a haunting reflection directly inspired by the historical logs and reports we've poured over today. The next time you find yourself near the ocean, maybe you are standing on the deck of a ferry at night, or walking alone on a cold beach, or just standing on a pier looking out at a foggy horizon, remember the Governor Parr.
Remember that some ships belong entirely to the men and women who sail them. They are tools, obedient, mechanical, and predictable.
But others belong only to the sea. They follow rules of physics and nature that we don't fully understand or control. And as you look out into that dark, moving water, you have to ask yourself, in the vast, unlit, unexplored stretches of the Atlantic, or the immense void of the Pacific, or the violent Southern Ocean, what other massive, silent ghosts might be riding the dark currents right now, just out of sight, waiting in the fog?